And it's another edition of Recording in Progress. My name's Larry, and with me, as always, is Mr. Jim DeJesus. How are you doing, Jim?
Huh? What? What?
We had a bad experience at the movies, but we're
What? Oh wait,
we
this
we
is O'Dweeds. God
oh
damn it.
yeah you're
Anyways,
taking O'Dweeds.
damn it. I thought that was a
So
real
we
shit.
got an interesting show. We're gonna change up our format a little bit. So if you're in this comment section, please tell us if you like this change to the format. So we're going to talk about our first review here after we touch on two celebrity deaths. Robert Evans, producer of Chinatown, who saved Paramount Pictures, dies at the age of 89. So, if you ever watched did you see the Comedy Central cartoon Kid Notorious?
No.
Well, it was about a cartoon version of Robert Evans, who was a man about town raconteur. Slash was his next door neighbor, and it was a weird little show, but he was an interesting dude. As chief of Paramount Pictures, Robert Evans presided over a remarkable run of film classics, including Chinatown, The Godfather, also Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, I just
What's
watched
fascinating?
Rosemary's Baby the other day. It's a good movie.
Yeah, what's fascinating about Rosemary's Baby is he convinced Mia Farrow to say no to Frank Sinatra to do his movie. And Frank was also doing another one of his movies.
Oh.
That's right. And for the premiere of The Godfather, he got Secretary of State Henry Kissinger to show up with his date. Of course, at the time, Henry Kissinger was dating two women at the same time. So
Oof.
Henry Kissinger showed up with two women on each arm. That's the sort of power player he was, the last of the golden, glamorous people in the 1970s. He basically created Jack Nicholson's career. That's who he is. He made a romance movie where he married the star, and they had a kid together. He had a natural eye for powerful movies and an ability so fine-tuned he was credited with saving Paramount. But away from the studio, his life was so calamitous and excessive that he nearly lost it all when he was ousted from his perch on top of the studio. At one point in the 80s, he was in rehab, lost all his money, lost his house, and he snuck out of rehab, and Jack Nicholson flew to Switzerland to beg the owner of his house to give it to him. That's to give you an idea of the guy. Described by former Times film columnist Patrick Goldstein as one of the great self-invented characters of our age, Evans reached meteoric heights during his reign as production chief of Paramount in the late 60s and early 70s, presiding over blockbuster hits that revived the ailing studio's fortunes. Along the way, he transformed from a sportswear mogul into an independent producer. So Robert and his brother made sportswear in New York. He went out to LA to build business contracts and things. He said, you know what? I'm going to try to produce some movies. And the legend was born from there. But he fell from grace in the 1980s when he was involved in a drug scandal and later linked to a high-profile murder case.
Oof.
Unexpected true-life plot twist, as Evans put it, turned him from legend to leper. Evans, who died in Los Angeles on Saturday at the age of 89, had been characterized as vain and self-destructed, warm and loyal, a romantic rather than a businessman, a legendary ladies' man, a glamorous gambler, and the last of the dying breed, and a survivor. If Evans were a racehouse, Chinatown screenwriter Robert Towne once said, they'd have to call him Caution to the Winds. So another important element about that, the character in Wag the Dog that Dustin Hoffman played was Dustin Hoffman's basically parody of Robert Evans. And let's see here if there's anything else interesting here.
Probably not.
He had a documentary about himself, which is a very good, was based off his autobiography. He also tried to break into the movies, and he basically talked his way into starring in a movie when all the major stars tried to get him fired. And living legend, and when he got his house back, he was kind of on rickety finance things. The head of Paramount Studios at the time, who had started as like an intern during his time there, said, you know what, man, I'm going to give you a production contract. You're going to be involved. You're going to make money. We're going to take care of you. So Robert Evans passed away after a legendary life and career. Also passing away this week from a legendary life and career was John Witherspoon. of Friday and the Wayans Brothers movies fame, also the granddad from the Boondocks. John Witherspoon, an actor and comedian for decades who has made audiences laugh in his TV shows and films, including Friday's feature franchise and the WB's Wayans Brothers, died suddenly at his home. He was 77. It is with deepest sorrow that we can confirm our beloved husband and father, John Witherspoon, one of the hardest working men in show business, died today at his home in Sherman Oaks at the age of 77. Witherspoon's family said in a statement to Deadline he is survived by his wife Angela and his sons J.D. Alexander and a large family. We are all in shock. Please give us a moment in privacy so we celebrate his life and work together. John, you say, I'm no big deal, but he was a huge deal to us. He was in such movies as The Jazz Singer, Hollywood Shuffle, Boomerang, Vampire in Brooklyn, The Ladies' Man, and Fakin' Da Funk. He, of course, did all the Friday movies. He was, of course, Granddad in the Boondocks. He was on the Tracy Morgan Show, First Family. He was also in Black Jesus. He was a frequent guest on the David Letterman Show. So let's have an F in the chat for respects for these two Hollywood legends who've gone away.
Yeah. Oh, we also have to press F in the chat for someone's career.
Oof.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about somebody who we have zero respect for, Morgan Spurlock.
So don't press F, but yeah, his career is dead.
So, Jim, you're going to introduce our audience to Morgan Spurlock here. So I'll let you take it over because you had a good introduction.
Okay, so, well, how about this? I saw Super Size Me in theaters, and this was at the time that I was a progressive or whatever, and I believed every word of it, bought it on DVD, and then once I started learning, like, what was really going on, I was like, yeah, I'm not a huge fan. Quite the contrary. Anytime anyone brings it up in conversations, I just go on a diatribe. So, this movie is a follow-up to Super Size Me. In case you forgot what that movie was about, it was about an alcoholic who tried to trick the world into thinking that his alcoholic-related diseases was a result of eating fast food for 30 days.
Also, don't forget, instead of eating fast food like a normal person would eat, he ate, 5,500 calories?
5,000 calories a day.
5,000 calories, which is double the high estimate for a man of his age.
Yeah, and it's also nearly impossible to eat that much food from the guidelines that he laid out unless he was purposely gorging himself.
Which he was.
Yes. So he wasn't ordering a meal. Like, he was ordering a meal and sundaes and probably, a couple extra things here and there, snacks in between. So he was definitely breaking the rules. If you eat the highest caloric value meal and you supersized every one, you would not even reach 4,000 calories, let alone 5,000 calories. And he wasn't supersizing every meal. He said he only did it like 9 times, and he refuses to give out logs.
You could actually get to around 3,000 calories if you supersized everything, like 3,000 to 4,000.
Yeah. There's been another documentary filmmaker who did a great expose about it called Fathead, where he actually tried to get a hold of Morgan Spurlock's logs because he said he kept logs of everything that he ate during those 30 days. And they kept refusing. They kept refusing to release it, and he has never made them public. So in this movie,
because they were lies,
we follow Morgan Spurlock, who is a sexual harasser, a serial adulterer, a fraud, and an alleged date rapist.
Now, and the key thing is he's an alleged
chronic
date
alcoholic
because he admitted to all of those other things.
Yes. Well, he admitted to being an alleged date rapist.
Well, yes. I mean, you can admit that somebody's alleging something happened with you, but that's different than, saying, yeah, I totally sexually harassed all these women. I cheated on my wife a whole bunch of times, including the wife who was a vegan during Super Size Me, who now not only abandoned me, also went to embrace meat eating.
Did she really?
Yeah. She went from vegan to eating meat after being with him.
Oh, wow. Oh, no. So, yeah, so both mothers of his children he cheated on, including every single girlfriend he's ever had. Cheated on them. Sexually harassed women that he worked with. He was a fraud in terms of Super Size Me, as we talked about why later. If you really want to watch an interesting kind of explanation, a very quick one, Mr. Dapperton just did a video not too long ago talking about why that movie was crap. And yeah, he alleged in a Me Too thing when he admitted, and he didn't have to. He didn't have to. He just decided to do it. Alleged that he may have date raped somebody, and they said that he did, but he's not sure. That's
Now,
what he says.
this movie was supposed to be a YouTube Red exclusive, but after he admitted to allegedly sexually harassing a whole bunch of women and being alleged by one of the women to have date raped them, it got kicked to regular YouTube, if I remember correctly, Jim.
No. So we watched a pirated copy. Somebody uploaded that was up on YouTube. YouTube didn't pick up on, which is weird because YouTube has really good algorithms and they'd pick up on that stuff right away. But
it's almost like they're pissy at him for screwing up their deal.
Right. So he was going to release this film in 2015. He premiered it at, I think, Sundance. And they were about to ready to release it on YouTube Red, and right before he did, he stepped down from his company and admitted to being admitted to having been accused of date rape and all kinds of other sexual improprieties,
which most of them he admitted to.
Yeah, and then he ended up stepping down from his company immediately afterwards. By the way, he didn't have to do that. He did not have to do that. But this film. So this movie was made in 2015. We're just now getting to see it. Was it 2015? Yeah, it was 2015. So we're just now getting to see it. It was released in September. And basically the story of this is he's going to create the first honest chicken joint, which is ironic considering that he's a pathological liar in all the other works that he does.
And
so
most of the things he did in this weren't really honest.
And he does a lot of very dishonest things in this film.
Also,
well.
He complains about fillers being used in fast food. And most of this movie is realistically filler.
Yeah. And you kind of get a taste of it right away when the first thing he complains about is MSG. Now, is there anything wrong with... Is MSG bad for you if you eat it all the time and you're eating like healthy doses of it and you're just pouring it on everything that you eat? Yeah, there could probably be some damages. But if you're going to just use it sparingly, like instructed... or how it's normally used, even in Asian cuisine, you're not going to have a problem. There's a big myth about being allergic to MSG, but he makes a big fuss about it at the very beginning. Shortly after this big fuss about MSG at Chick-fil-A, he starts going off about how you should never eat at Chick-fil-A because they don't like gay marriage, which is not true anymore. I think the owner passed away that was like that, and the family doesn't have like. The younger kids don't have that kind of opinion. They're just like, we're just going to have Sundays off just because, in honor of my dad, but we don't care. We're not funding these things anymore.
They're Christians, but they're not super funding into weird things. Mm-hmm. They want to fund normal charities.
Yeah, that's long and done with, but they're still fighting this battle, I guess. So he's going to start this new chicken joint, right? He's going to start a brand new Chick-fil-A, and it's going to be the honest version. So the first thing he does is he tries to order chickens like he's ordering pizza or he's ordering stuff from Amazon. He just starts calling them up and saying, "Hey, I need some chickens.
I need like 100 chickens."
And they're like, "That's not. No, we don't. No, we don't do that."
Well, I'm sure he edited out the portion where somebody from the various agriculture places he called said that to him.
Yeah, where they were like, "No, you could either find a wholesaler and buy it bulk, or,
because there were a lot of suspicious edits."
Yes.
In that section where he was calling chicken wholesale.
There's lots of suspicious edits throughout the entire film. Very suspicious. That doesn't seem... The way that it's presented, you're just like, that can't be right. That can't be a real life thing that I just watched. That can't be right. We're going to get into one of those that's pretty blatant, right? Mm. And one of the people that he calls ended up going like, all right, and what's your name? And he's like, Morgan Spurlock. And he's like...
The filmmaker?
The filmmaker. All right. Let me tell you who to call then. Oof. Big oof. Yeah. Hire a secretary or hire another person to do that stuff if you're trying to be like all undercover.
Especially because he had other people working for him in that whole scenario.
Yeah. So one of the things he complains about is that there's no gender equality in chickens. You see, because everybody wants male chickens because male chickens are bigger than female chickens, and you want to have more meat on your chicken, right? So they separate the chickens by gender Oh, I'm sorry, sexual orientation. Who knows?
No,
Like,
it's gender in this case.
So he's getting up, like, you know, he's like, wow, like they're sexist, these people. It's like, I'm not sure if he's tossing it as a joke or if he's being serious or trying to show that as like
being ambiguous, so you could take it either way.
Yeah,
he can argue either way.
Yeah,
because he's a disingenuous hack and fraud.
Right, but if your goal is to produce more meat per feed, and males produce more meat, then wouldn't you want more males?
Yeah,
that's just
the only thing you want female chickens for is for eggs.
Yeah,
and also the way these chickens are bred, they're bred to get muscly up, so they're not even good for eggs.
No. They're good for sitting down on their ass and doing nothing all day, getting delicious and tender and juicy.
Yep.
And so there's a good segment of this video where they're showing chicks being tossed from one bin to another, just like they're just flinging them or like dumping them out on the ground, or actually, no, they're not being dumped. They're like kind of being tossed onto the ground. Yeah. And he was like, wow, like I'm being gentle with mine. They're like, oh no, it stimulates them. But they kept like showing like slow-mo shots of all these things, like as if you're supposed to feel bad for the chickens, which I'm just like, no, they're chicks. They're pretty resilient. They can handle that stuff like that. That's yeah. And then, you know, oh, it's also terrible that they're stepping on them. And, you know, you're kind of supposed to feel bad for all the dead chicks that they're stepping on, but you kind of have to.
Dumb animals. Yes. And stuff happens.
Yeah. And they run underneath your feet. You can't help but to step on them. It's like impossible not to step on them. But then, like, we're all of a sudden supposed to be mad at that guy, right? But then later in the movie, we're supposed to be like sympathetic to his cause because
he's being screwed over by Big Chicken.
But who cares? He's a baby chick stepper on her.
Well, we should probably talk about Big Chicken because this was one of the few actually good things in this documentary that was actually substantive.
So far, all we've gotten filler is so far. That's all we got so far is a filler. Then he talks about something that's actually pretty interesting, which is the health halos, right? Where fast food companies present things as like, oh, this is healthy. This is a chicken sandwich.
Say fried because fried is the F word. We say crispy.
Well, not even that. I mean, there's like Subway, or like, you know, everybody is convinced in their head that Subway is like health food when it's really, really not. It's like one of the fattier ones. And it's mostly because they're just pounding all kinds of carbs and sugar on their sandwiches. And then they go, oh, but there's a salad under there too. It's like, well, great. But, you know, there's
delicious carbs.
Yeah, there's delicious carbs all over it. So that is kind of the health halo. And then they also do things on top of that, like marketing terms. So instead of saying fried chicken, it's crispy chicken. And then they go, this is terrible that all these fast food companies are creating delicious, delicious food instead of the stuff that tastes like styrofoam, which is the grilled chicken that nobody orders. And so he goes out on the street and goes like, hey, why don't you get the grilled chicken instead of the crispy chicken? They're like,
it tastes nasty.
Because the fried chicken tastes better? So he's essentially upset with the fast food industry because people want to eat garbage. And he never acknowledges in this film that like the whole health halo craze came about because of Super Size Me and his dishonesty in that film that led all these fast food companies to go, okay, we're going to make healthy options. And then no one bought them. And then they said, also, well, how about we make these healthy options, but with fried chicken on them? And then people were like, okay, I can buy into that. And they're like, well, people just don't want to eat.
How terms like all natural don't actually mean anything.
Yes. But that's a USDA thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the USDA, like their guidelines are so loose that you can say all kinds of things. Like like our chickens don't have hormones and they're cage free. But the problem is you can't have caged animals, or you can't have caged meat chickens. And you can't have hormones in your chickens per USDA regulations. It's illegal for them to do.
These chickens grow and do basically heart attack machines.
Yeah. So, and then he's talking about how he's going to create like a healthy option, which is weird because he's creating a grilled fried chicken, which I have never seen a grilled fried chicken before.
Kentucky Fried Chicken had one for a while, but nobody ate it.
Yeah, or their grilled chicken are technically deep fried, but they're not going like, oh, our crispy chicken is actually grilled. after we deep fry them. I don't think there's any places that actually do that. But so let's see. And so in the part where they're working with the food scientists who are making the new sandwich for him, he said like, "Hey, is this healthy?" And then there's like an awkward pause, and then everybody starts giggling hysterically. And then he goes, "I guess I'll take that as a no." And the way it's shot, you're just like, dude, this is not real life. This is something you edited.
Also, more importantly,
I'm pretty sure they told you, no, this is fattening. And then he probably said something funny, and then he was like, all right.
Or he said, no, I mean, come on, really. You can tell me if it's healthy, right? They laughed at him because they probably thought he was, like, putting them on.
Yeah. So he also talks about like the free range chicken things. How all you have to do is just let them have access to a very small space in order to be considered free range.
And also these chickens can barely move because they're bred to become meat.
Yeah, and if you let them outside, they'll just die because they're kind of wussies. Which by the way, he's fine with chickens that like are bred for big meat and all that stuff, but he's not okay with that, but he is okay with, apples being selectively bred to be just nothing but meat. I don't get it. Okay. I guess one's sentient and one's not, but, whatever. Then there's a little bit of anti-capitalism that goes on in this movie. So she goes to this lady and he's like, why do they make garbage that tastes absolutely delicious? And the lady goes, because that's what people want to buy. Duh. But it's not in that term. She doesn't say it in those terms. The way she said it is because Wall Street wants them to make money and shareholders, and they have to push as much product as possible. And they're just trying to kill us all for money because capitalism is bad. It's like, yeah. Who'd have thunk that a for-profit company is looking to make profits? Who'd have thunk it? And then he says that there's no honest businesses, which is true even after he opens up his. And then he also says, and by the way, they're still pushing all this weird stuff, right? So one of the things he talks about is like, if a baby grew as fast as a broiler chicken, which is the breed of chicken that's meant to grow big and fat and can't do anything.
It'd be a 600-pound baby.
It'd be a 600-pound baby, but it's like, yeah, there's lots of animals that grow really fast, faster than humans per capita. Like, what's your point? Does it make them bad? No. And then the National Chicken Foundation or the National Chicken Council started warning other people in
Morgan
the farmers.
Spurlock, noted liar and disreputable documentary filmmaker, is wanting to get in the chicken raising business for some sort of thing he's doing.
Yeah.
You guys should pay attention to that.
Yeah. And he's like, well, what are they trying to hide? Well, maybe they're trying to hide things that, you're going to twist out of context.
Like you did last time.
Yeah. There's also a little bit of commentary about the minimum wage being too low. And then he opens up his chicken restaurant and everything on the wall. You know how like fast food restaurants have that crap on the wall that says like, like we make the best chicken and, it's quality and fresh. And, like we get it from locally sourced thing. So he has all that stuff in there, but it's honest. It's just like by local water, we mean like we got it from the tap locally here, or we bought it and brought it here. That's what we can legally call it local. And so little things like little marketing terms he points out, but there's two things that are really important in this movie that he talks about. The rest is just nothing but filler. One is the marketing. Like, yeah, it's just some dishonest marketing going on. We can all agree that that's not particularly a good thing, right? But he's twisting it like way beyond, like way even worse than what it is. And, saying that and trying to make it as like a stance against capitalism. The other points that he brings up, which is pretty interesting, and I did some digging on this as well, is that there is a tournament system within the chicken farmers. So the idea originally was if you were a chicken farmer, you had to order your chicks and all that stuff through the companies associated with the big chicken companies. There's 5 of them, Tyson being the biggest of the bunch. And, in order for you to sell your chickens on the open market, you have to go through one of these companies and do all this thing. And how it worked initially was they would pay you per pound. So if you had like 10,000 pounds of chickens, you get paid for 10,000 pounds of chickens. And if you wanted to make more that year, you had to sell more than 10,000 pounds of chicken, right? Well, now there's this new system which encourages competition, which if that didn't encourage competition enough, what's going on here? Where they're not forced to. Well, I guess they are forced to be in that market in order to like upgrade their things. And the better that they do, the more they get paid per pound for chicken. And it doesn't matter how much they make. At the end of the day, they put them in like a little tournament system, and so the ones that produce the more and upgrade do the most amount of upgrades to their farm, they get more money per pound per chicken than the person who did the worst. And a lot of farmers are pretty upset about it. A lot of them are really kind of scraping by. They're not able to afford the upgrades that they need to make in order to continue.
Some are suing.
Yes, and there's a lot of them that are suing. And there is some debate internally about if the merits to it. It seems as though it's pretty garbage. I'm probably going to end up agreeing with the plaintiffs in that decision. It does seem kind of bullshit. But again, that's not something that you can make an entire film about. We just talked about it for 5 seconds or for 1 minute. That's all you can really talk about it for.
Yeah.
But he wants to make a movie around this central point, and how the farmer who is supplying his chickens, really being disenfranchised by the system. But at the same time, we're also supposed to feel bad about him for his plight, while at the same time being mad at him for stepping on baby chickens. There's a big of a disconnect. So yeah, Morgan Spurlock is kind of dishonest. He's making a mountain out of a molehill. If he focused more on that aspect of it and made something like a YouTube short, he could have done something good. However,
but he doesn't want to do something good.
No, he wants to be a dishonest piece of shit. And then you're watching it going like, well, maybe my initial reaction to hearing about this tournament thing is going like, well, obviously this is garbage too. He's lying about this because he's lied about virtually everything else in this movie. Why should I believe him now?
There's another wrinkle on all that. When all the farmers were complaining about loans and shit, that's kind of the life of a farmer.
Yeah.
You leverage your farm, you leverage your crop. If you leverage it right, you get ahead. Most of the time you leverage it okay, so you just scrape by.
Yeah, so this movie was bad. It was really kind of boring. The humor in it was either
here's the real question.
I think the only humor that worked in the movie was when they were at the very end, where they were at their chicken place and they had all this faux marketing stuff, which I thought would have been clever had there not already been a fast food place that does that, which is the Heart Attack Grill. Which you go into the Heart Attack Grill, they tell you right up front, all of our food's going to kill you. All of our spokespeople have had heart attacks and died as a result of eating our free food that we give them. One person has had a heart attack and died while eating at our restaurant. But that's the whole point. The whole point is to shock you into going like, oh, maybe I should rethink the way I eat.
No, that's not what it does.
And it's also like a little bit of a tourist trap as well. Well, the guy that owned it used to own a chain of Jenny Craig's.
Yeah,
and he realized that wasn't working, and he was trying to do shock therapy, so he closed them all down and opened up his fast food place, and it did pretty well.
So here's the serious question, Jim: Would you eat that chicken?
No, the way they're making it looks pretty gross. How they're brushing on the charcoal stuff. Like, why are they grilling it again? That would have to end up drying it out. It can't be good after that. However, I think the structure of the sandwich, like if they didn't fuck with the patty like that, that's great. I love coleslaw on sandwiches. It's fantastic.
Also, it's got that panko breading on it, which was pretty good.
Yeah. If they didn't do the grilling stuff on top of it, it would have been a fine sandwich. Or if they just made it a grilled chicken sandwich, that would have been fine too.
Or, they could have also put it on a potato bun, which would have been even better.
Yeah. Well, what do they put it on? They put it on a brioche bun. What do they call them?
Brioche bun.
Brioche bun, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We didn't miss much for this movie, having a hard time finding distribution. We didn't miss
Kel
much.
Shock, dishonest documentary filmmaker, makes a dishonest documentary. Kel Shock.
Yeah.
So, you know Dick from the Dick Show, right?
Yes, I know Dick from the Dick Show.
So Dick from the Dick Show tried to make his own equivalent to Patreon that didn't censor things. Well, turns out that didn't work out so well for him because Discover has called up Chase Manhattan / Chase and told him to cancel their business relationship with him.
Oof.
And Bank of America did that previously, and they called it a business decision. And he's trying to find out a way to go, but all the financial processes that are left over are like ones that do it for porn companies, and they charge 10% fees.
Which the porn company is more than okay with because they make so much money. They're just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Porn. So, what do you think about the creeping financial censorship going after
Creepy.
Dick, who's
we've been dealing with Operation Choke Point for a while now.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Dick said in his terms of service, if a bank asks me to drop somebody, I'll drop them. So they didn't even give him the opportunity to drop any problematic people on his very small service.
Oh.
They just said, nah, we're not doing it.
Yep. By the way, there is a company that does transactions, credit card transactions, and the owner doesn't give a shit. Genuinely does not give a shit, and he hasn't been giving a shit for a while and helping people who are considered to be terror bad by these agencies, various agencies, financial agencies, government agencies, to be wrong thinkers, and nothing happens to him. He's still like, I don't care. Still going to transact these payments.
So we're gonna squeeze a little topic in after this one because I forgot to put it on the thing, and I actually promoted it on Twitter. So the guys from Game of Thrones quit doing Star Wars, and I'm using "quit" as a big set of air quotes. There's been a whole lot of development in that story that's been going on in the news, and there's been lots of leaks about it, which is kind of fascinating. So the allegation in the most recent leaks is that they were fired after the ending of Game of Thrones. But they said, listen, fan base is upset. We can't keep you guys on, but we'll pretend like we're keeping you on until you get a better deal somewhere else. They then got their Netflix deal, got $250 million from Netflix. And then as the big push for The Mandalorian and The Rise of Skywalker comes out, they says, we'd totally love to do Star Wars, but our schedule is super busy. And Kathleen Kennedy said, yeah, totally super busy as well, but we would love to have you guys come back. So what do you think? Do you think they were actually fired? Do you think it's possible that Disney was stringing them along because they didn't know what they were doing? And they decided to go to somebody who was willing to give them a paycheck today?
Well, have you seen Game of Thrones?
There you go. And also these guys recently went to a film festival in Austin. And they said, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. We were making Game of Thrones. We've never ran a TV show before. We never even talked to a costume designer or seen one before.
Oh.
And they said, well, why didn't you have people of color or women in your writer's room? Well, we didn't have a writer's room. We just wrote everything.
Oh.
So I think, the bloom fell off the rose in more ways than one for Disney. But this puts a very interesting spin on the Rian Johnson trilogy and the upcoming movie Knives Out. So let's talk a little bit interesting hypothetical. So let's say you're Rian Johnson. You're interested in a certain type of independent movies, kind of crime, kind of heist movies that are kind of satirical, kind of parodies. You've made 2 commercial movies. You've made The Last Jedi, which made money, even though people don't like it and it's controversial. And you made Looper, which made money. So people know, hey, you can work with big stars, and they're giving him money. I suspect that if Knives Out does well, Rian Johnson will similarly come forward and say, I'm doing these other movies, and there's going to be like a 3 to 4 year gap. I don't even know what my schedule is going to look like at that point in time. So I'm just gonna wave off this Star Wars movie for now, and like if our schedules line up, it would be great to do that movie again. Because here's the interesting wrinkle on both of these trilogies. When Kathleen Kennedy's contract was renewed this year, she was renewed for a 3-year contract. There's a 3-year hiatus on new Star Wars movie. So they don't want to have a new person come in immediately after her trying to commit to a vision of another creative executive. So I think that if Rian Johnson comes out and says, yeah, not making this trilogy, we may have finally seen the last of Kathleen Kennedy, and in 3 to 4-ish years, there's going to be a successor announced, and there's going to be a new direction for Star Wars. What do you think, Jim?
I don't know.
Jim?
I'm on Rich Evans for this one. I'm on
You don't
Rich
know?
Evans. Yeah, I think Rich Evans has a good point. Is that there's only so many things you can do with Star Wars, and the moment you step out
I
of TIE
disagree.
Fighters,
I disagree
X-Wings.
fundamentally. So, like, we could remake the Few Dollars More trilogy as a Star Wars movie. You recast Clint Eastwood's character as a Jedi hiding in the post-Order 66 world, and you have various people in the Outer Rim worlds with the various cowboy movie settings. Slap a couple of other coats of paint on it for Star Wars plot elements, and boom, you have a Star Wars cowboy movie. You can basically take all those kung fu movies about the fall of the Shaolin Temple and talk about how after the fall of the Jedi Order at one of the many points in history, these different things evolved in the world. So you could put a Star Wars coat of paint on that.
Right, but you'd have to put the Star Wars coat of paint on it. Like,
No, but I mean that's a minor thing.
mm.
It's like the Marvel movies. Yes, they're superhero movies, but they have an underlying movie DNA underneath them. So it's really Disney doesn't know what they're doing. And Lucasfilm doesn't know what they're doing.
If they did something that's like in the expanded universe, like the Guardians of the Will character, I thought was the only interesting thing in Rogue One, because nothing else was interesting. Oh, the end fight sequence where they're at war, that was kind of fun, but I didn't care about anybody, so who cares? But the one thing that I did care about, one thing I was really interested in, was the blind Guardian of the Will.
Yeah.
Why didn't they make a movie about the Guardians of the Will? Oh, that's right. Copyright issues. They can't do that.
Well, no. They could have made a Guardian of the Well character because that was something they actually invented for the new canon. So there's no money issues for copyright.
I thought the Guardian of the Will was in the expanded universe that they couldn't.
That was actually originally a concept that Lucas came up with before the first Star Wars movie happened. So it's included within their IP. Although Lucas's concept of the Guardian of the Wills is an entirely different type of character.
Oh.
So it's entirely within their bailiwick to play with.
They don't want to go down that, but they don't want to go down that route because they want to play it safe, but not too safe.
Not too safe. And also they have a misconception about China. So there's been only 6 movies that have actually needed China to be profitable. All the rest of the movies that have made big money in China made big money everywhere else in the world. Now, of course, you don't want to say, hey, an audience of 400 million moviegoers, I don't want to compete for that audience. You don't want to ever be in a position where you say that. But if you can't make a good movie that competes everywhere in the world to make it compete for China, 400 moviegoers here versus 800 to 900 everywhere else, that's not a good business decision either. And I think a lot of creative executives really are overestimating the importance of China. And there's also growing evidence that China has exaggerated figures of how much they actually brought into the box office to kind of hook the studios more and more into a dependency on them and into becoming an extension of Chinese power. Oh, while we're on the subject with that, are you familiar with TikTok, Jim?
I'm a 36-year-old man. Of course I'm not.
Even though we did use a famous TikTok clip several times for an opening video sequence for the show. Exclusive, U.S. opens national security investigation into TikTok. Just wait. The U.S. government has launched a national security review of TikTok owner Beijing ByteDance technology company's $1 billion acquisition of the U.S. social media app Musical.ly, according to two people familiar with the matter. While the $1 billion acquisition was completed 2 years ago, U.S. lawmakers have been calling in recent weeks for a national security probe into TikTok, concerning the Chinese company may be censoring politically sensitive content and raising questions about how it stores personal data. TikTok has been growing more popular among U.S. teenagers at a time of growing tensions between Washington and Beijing over trade and technology transfers. About 60% of TikTok's 26.5 million monthly active users in the United States are between the ages of 16 and 24, and most of the rest of them are probably pedophiles. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which reviews deals by foreign acquirers for potential national security risks, has started to review the Musical.ly deal, sources said. TikTok did not seek clearance from CFIUS when it acquired Musical.ly, they added, which gives the U.S. security panel scope to investigate it now. CIFUS is in talks with TikTok about the measures it could take to avoid divesting the Musical.ly assets it acquired. The source said details of those talks, referred to by CFIUS as mitigation, could not be learned. The specific concerns of CFIUS has not been learned. Sources requested anonymity because CFIUS reviews are confidential. While we cannot comment on ongoing regulatory processes, TikTok has made clear that we have no higher priority than earning the trust of users and regulators in the U.S. Part of that effort includes working with Congress, and we are committed to doing so. A TikTok spokesperson said, "You know what? I just want one of these companies one of these times say, you know what? Fuck the government. Fuck regulators. My name's John McAfee. I'm here to do cocaine and have sex with a whale."
And bath salts.
And then people say, "Mr. McAfee, this is a children's birthday party." What?
Sir, this is a 7-Eleven.
By law, information filed with CFIUS may not be disclosed by CFIUS to the public, said a spokesman for the U.S. Treasury Department, which chairs CFIUS. She added, Treasury does not comment on information regarding to specific CFIUS cases. You know what? That's another one. What about a government agency? Yeah, we really think that guy did it. I mean, look, we've already put in a couple of thousand man hours into it, so we're probably going to convict him of something. We just haven't figured out what yet. Wouldn't you appreciate that honesty?
Mm-hmm.
Last week, U.S. Senate Minority Leader Chuck
Would make
Schumer
my job easier.
Exactly. And Senator Tom Cotton asked for a national security probe. They said they were concerned about the video sharing platform's collection of user data and whether China censors content seen by U.S. users. They also suggested that TikTok could be targeted by foreign influence campaigns. So just think, the 2020 election could be stolen by TikTok. Just think of how absurd that sounds, Jim. With over...
So maybe we should take a cue from the Chinese. Wait, you guys have elections?
With over 110 million downloads in the U.S. alone, TikTok is a potential counterintelligence threat that we cannot ignore, Schumer and Cotton wrote to Joseph McGuire, Acting Director of National Intelligence. So, Jim, are you afraid of TikTok being part of a secret red Chinese threat to erode our way of life?
See, I'd be okay with it, but they want to ban my Winnie the Pooh.
Oh no, not Pooh Bear.
Yeah, Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear.
You know, speaking of Pooh Bear, though, BlizzCon's happening.
Oh,
let's take a look at this first tweet here. I mean, that's a pretty buff-looking Pooh Bear, don't you think?
Right. So
the CEO of Blizzard.
Maybe they should have hired him to be the bad Terminator in this movie, right? Oof.
Exactly. So the CEO of Blizzard came out and said, "I'm very sorry that we didn't live up to your expectation of us and our values. Mm-hmm. And we acted too rashly, and we didn't take the time to listen. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take this time to listen and act better going forward." Mm-hmm. Now you notice, and he also said, "I take personal responsibility and accountability."
Sure you do.
So, what does accountability mean to you, Jim?
Admitting to the mistakes that you've done and do everything in your effort to try to reverse those mistakes or to make remedy of
Yeah,
those mistakes and to not to commit those same mistakes again.
yeah. He didn't say that.
Oh,
He didn't do that at all.
is he just
No,
doing one of those like I'm sorry if you're offended type of things?
no, it's not quite that bad.
Okay.
So let me read from this next article that's on The Verge that actually has his quote here. And they were actually aware of the protesters. They made a little joke about them. And he said, the specific views expressed by Blitzchung were not a factor in the decision we made. I want to be clear. No, that's not the right one. Uh, so here we go. Let me find where the quote is here. When I think about how most unhappy I am, I think about two things. We didn't live up to our higher standards we set for ourselves. And second, we failed in our purpose. For that, I'm sorry, and I accept accountability. He didn't resign, though, or anything like that.
Oh.
And Jim's good friend, Mr. Anti-Bully, has more Winnie the Poohs here,
Yep.
along with somebody handing out a free Hong Kong t-shirt.
Is it a free Hong t-shirt? Oh, yeah, it's a free Hong Kong t-shirt.
Yeah.
Maybe it should have been a free Liberate.
Hong now, Kong shirt.
That would have be less confusing.
Now, there was a ban on certain types of cameras. I guess they thought that people didn't have phones because of what happened last year. So what do you think about the current controversy of BlizzCon?
Yeah,
I mean,
I know there's a lot of
appreciate
people who really like Blizzard stuff. They're really into Diablo or they're really into World of Warcraft. We're like, yep, I won't touch any of that stuff. I'm not going to touch any of it.
But I will say, I at least appreciate the fact that they didn't ban the protesters. They just took all that on the chin. I appreciate the fact that they said, yeah, no, that we're just going to take this all on the chin. We're going to have to own all of this. We're going to have to own all of that. So I appreciate the fact that they recognize the monumental nature of their screw up. And they accepted it. Meanwhile, people who didn't accept the monumental nature of their screw up, are you familiar with Deadspin?
I am now.
So Deadspin was part of the broad Gawker Media conglomerated Hydra that kind of lost them some money because, the whole Hulk Hogan thing, and they had lots of woke people writing about sports. And it's been sold to two successive owners after the fall of Gawker Media.
Oh.
And now a bunch of reporters have walked out, and we're going to have a moment and maybe shed a tear.
My tears are
Deadspin's slogan has long been sports news without access, favor, or discretion. Add writers to that list. At least 12 of the website staffers have walked away from the outlet since its hedge fund owner parent company ordered the site to stick to sports in a memo this week, depleting the staff to just a handful of employees, which is good because they don't have a whole lot of money. The hedge fund is looking to make this profitable, so somebody else will take it over. Features editor Tom Lay was among those who left, telling the New York Times that what's happening with the online sports magazine is a disgrace. The exit was coming Thursday with longtime writer Drew Magary announced he was heading out the door. Magary managed to post his goodbye. I resigned from Deadspin this morning. That was a fun time you had and me had all those years, wasn't it? Let's do it again sometime. Magary wrote on Twitter. This was a guy who once ran a sports website based around the joke of Stacy Keibler getting kissed by what's his name of that old Jets quarterback. Anyway, she got kissed by a drunken quarterback, and he made a lot of edgy boy jokes, but then he got woke when he worked for Deadspin,
as they normally do.
Like most Deadspin writers, Magary drifted back and forth from sports coverage of pop culture. While Magary is probably best known for his annual Why Your Team Sucks stories about each NFL team, including the Eagles. This article is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. He also wrote a yearly takedown of the Holiday Williams-Sonoma catalog, which was always a traffic winner. Also announcing his departure was Dan McQuaid, a former Philadelphia Magazine writer who's worked for Deadspin since March of 2017. Although he did a fair share of sports stories, McQuaid was also the author of an annual rundown of the best Wildwood Boardwalk t-shirts. which he referenced on in his departure announcement on Twitter. You know, maybe you should publish that for something that's not your sports writing gig. Like, I don't know, maybe you have a Patreon and you do that as like a Patreon exclusive. Or maybe like you have a website that you have people go to that you run advertisements on. Or, I don't know, maybe one of the other Gawker umbrellas has you write for them. So you can write sports in the sports magazine. Other staff writers who have announced they were leaving or who are confirmed their departure include Laura Wagner, Kelly McKinney, Laura Thiessen, Billy Haley, Chris Thompson, Patrick Redford, Albert Bucchino, and Don Consencio, Luis Paez Pumar, and Giri Nathan. All of the departures were effective immediately. The resignations follow the ouster of longtime writer and editor Barry Pacheski, a Temple University alumnus who was fired Tuesday for refusing to stick to the sport company's new sports-only policy for the sports website. G/O Media released a statement Thursday criticizing traffic on Deadspin's non-sports stories, claiming that readers didn't come for stories like It's Okay to Log Off, which itself had a sports hook, George W. Bush and Ellen DeGeneres' presence at the Dallas Cowboys game. Pacheski, who had been the site's longest-serving employee, called the company's claims demonstrably false. According to our analytics department, since the start of the year, non-sports stories have, on average, double the traffic of sports posts.
But you're running a sports website.
Exactly. That's the first thing. And secondly, so are we talking the average of all sports stories and the average of all non-sports stories? What's the balance between the two? Are we talking cumulative? Almost like he's using words that pretend to have a meaning in order to lie. I mean, I'm just saying, it's almost like that. I can't say it's like that because I can only allege that I think that's what he's saying, but I don't know.
Well, see, here's what you can do. You can have something like Deadspin, right, which talks about sports. And then when you want to talk about woke-ass bullshit, then you can do it on another website. Let's, we could call it, I don't know, Gawker.
Yeah, this company doesn't own the rights to Gawker, though.
Oh, they don't? What are they on?
I forgot what they own, but they only took the actually profitable portions of Gawker.
Oh, it's like Kotaku and okay.
Yeah. Tensions between employees and executives were already high when GO Media editorial director Paul Maidment sent out a memo on Monday telling Deadspin staffers they were no longer permitted to write stories that didn't have an explicit link to sports. In a Wednesday statement, the union that represents Deadspin employees blamed the sudden change on new CEO Jim Spanfeller.
Our hero.
From the outset, CEO Jim Spanfeller has worked to undermine a successful site by curtailing its most well-read coverage because it makes him personally uncomfortable. GMC Union Flack said in a statement, "Sticking to sports is always and has subtly been a thinly veiled euphemism for don't speak truth to power. In addition to being bad business, Spanfeller's actions are morally reprehensible." In addition
but you're running a sports website and you're not talking about sports on that website. Hello. Why don't you just not have a sports website?
In addition to the new sports-only edict, executives also removed a post written by Deadspin staff criticizing the company's new autoplay video ads. Now you see that's a totally fair criticism.
Yeah.
And if they left over that, I would at least respect them.
They didn't.
And remove comments from all Deadspin stories, which was like 9/10 of why you wanted to go to Gizmodo or any of those sites. Many former staffers directed readers to an open channel on sister G/O media website Gizmodo, where readers weighed in on the fate of Deadspin with some colorful comments. It's interesting for some reason they feel like Deadspin, being just another generic sports blog, is going to keep it alive, wrote one reader. Another asked if there was any plans to launch a new sports website elsewhere, with someone else pointed out that not understanding what your own site does can be a recurring problem. Yeah. While the resignations have drawn widespread support from other reporters and media observers, some former targets of the site, including Fox Nation host Britt McCary, Fox Sports host radio host, and former Deadspin employee Clay Travis, gloated over the departure. Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy celebrated with the news in a blog post and taunted several former staffers, including Wagner, who wrote about Portnoy's online feud with ESPN host Sam Ponder back in 2018. Also, there was one of them who said, like, I live in like Williamsburg, Brooklyn, but I live like in the really Puerto Rican area. And so they went around looking for Puerto Ricans who actually knew her. And they actually found one. So what do you think about the fall of woke media in Deadspin?
I guess someone pointed out something pretty interesting to me on Twitter,
Mm.
and I retweeted it, and I was like, "Oh!" So at first I was championing this, like, finally, it's not just Deadspin; it's also Kotaku is also suffering the same thing right now. We're all, they're saying like, "Hey, if it's not about video games, stop just posting woke articles and pretending this has anything to do with video games." I was like, "Yeah, finally, that's cool. Kotaku's probably going to be good." And someone pointed out like, "No. They had their own little isolated area where they could go and be shitheads. Now they're going to go infect everything else. Now they have no place to go." And I was like, "Oh, that's right. Damn it. We broke into the quarantine zone and let everybody out."
But the reason I posted this and kind of connected it to the DNA of a lot of these other stories we're talking about is I think we're seeing the death knell of
Woke, yeah, we
the
are.
woke era in media.
Yep.
Like these are some of the extremities that were like the first to get really infected, and they're starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to another bad case of where the infection is when we talk about our Terminator review.
Yep.
And I think we're nearing the end of the woke media era. So what do you think is going to replace it?
The conservative backlash, and then everybody's going to get sick of that.
Just yeah, but
sick of this.
Who's conservative that's going to drive the culture?
Well, Molyneux, obviously. He's the greatest philosopher ever. What are you talking about? Why did you even have to ask that?
Well,
or the other great philosopher, Paul Joseph Watson. And if that happens, you can imagine my shock.
So, on other things that are completely and totally grounded in reality, Doctor Who is getting back on the radar again, even though it had a completely forgettable season that nobody's really interested in watching the new one. Rumor, Doctor Who special sees Jodie Whittaker's doctor lecturing David Tennant on toxicity. Isn't that great? We're having the first female doctor that was slightly unpopular, who they didn't focus inordinately on wokeness. She's now going to talk about her own woke past.
Great.
Isn't that great, Jim?
Great.
A new Doctor Who rumor details Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor will lecture David Tennant's 10th Doctor in an upcoming crossover special. Now, isn't that kind of great that, these two actors who are on an iconic TV series called Broadchurch have been brought back together for one to lecture the other about being a mean man person? I mean, I just thought...
No, they're not. You're completely wrong, because we all know that mean man people aren't really people, so they're just mean men.
Too true. And also, they had a sequence in the prior Doctor Who's era where he said that they were beyond gender. When someone said, yep, but you're called Time Lords, and they're like, oh, yeah. So not only and this rumor comes from Doomcock, and I stress it's a rumor, but Doomcock has some good sources he's developed over time. We need to get some actual numbers so I can develop some sources and Jim can develop some. Not only does the rumor detail Whittaker's doctor will lecture Tennant, but it details the showrunner Chris Chibnall and actress Jodie Whittaker will remain on Doctor Who, contrary to previous rumors. Doomcock states, according to this source, contrary to rumors, it seems that Chibnall and Whittaker are not leaving the show. He adds, if that were the case, perhaps we wouldn't be getting the worst news, which is simply this. There's currently an upcoming crossover special in pre-production that features Jodie Whittaker going over the top and lecturing a cucked David Tennant on his past biases and forcing him to repent for his toxic masculinity. Doomcock continues, I wish this was a joke email my source added, but it's not. My source claims it's literally Jodie lecturing, talking about how she's talking about her past incarnations, putting them down. Doomcock's source also reveals that Matt Smith, who played the 11th Doctor, refused to participate in the special. According to my source, Matt Smith refused to do the special because of this shit they wouldn't have done to his character. Furthermore, my source informed me that Peter Capaldi made excuses that he needed to dedicate more time to the Suicide Squad, so he has to get around being in it. And David Tennant doesn't need money. So, I mean, he's probably like this kind of way from British politics, but still, that's kind of bad. As for when the special was supposed to air, Duvcock explained my source claims this was supposed to be an upcoming Christmas special. However, it may be bumped back to a 2020 release because of repeated delays in production, because the showrunner keeps making power plays for more money and creative control to push identity politics. Also, they don't want to do Christmas specials, they want to do New Year's specials. Because that's what everybody wants to do. It's the day after New Year's Eve. They have a hangover. They want to watch a woman belittle her beloved predecessor for being a toxic man boy. He then laments that, and so with Jodie Whittaker, the BBC has taken what was a charming, wonderful, whimsical, magical show and turned it into a propaganda vehicle for SJW politics. So, what do you think about more terrible news coming to Doctor Who?
I just don't watch that show. I'm glad I stopped watching it.
Yeah.
Started watching it, I was like, oh, this is interesting, and I got to like the second season, I'm like, okay, I'm done. And then I hear like the older stuff is better anyway, and I'm just like, yeah, but
it is better.
Just don't have the time.
And no, the guy who ran Sherlock Volt, he stopped being showrunner. This was the guy who did Broadchurch. The guy who ran Sherlock wouldn't allow this garbage to happen, and he's also a hack. But he has some standard.
Yeah.
So now we're going into our musical review section.
Yeah, because Larry watches a lot of movies. I watch a lot of movies, but not nearly as much as he does. And Larry listens to music, and I listen to music, but not nearly as much as I do. So I've been as he's been introducing me to new cinema. I've been introducing him to new music, and I'm stumbling all over my words tonight, and I don't know why.
And also, this whole process of reviewing a lot of movies, it's changed how both Jim and I see movies now.
Has this changed how you hear music?
This has improved my palette for music, certainly, but what I find is a lot of the things you pull out are stuff that I'd already like this here. I haven't heard this before, but it's like, oh, this sounds like a whole lot of different stuff that I actually enjoy.
Yeah. So this is Portishead with their self-titled album. I believe this is their second album after Dummy. I think this is their best album. People will fight me over this, but I think it's their best album. Either way, everybody agrees that these are like the best two albums from them. This is a UK trip hop band that comes out of Bristol, England. And basically it's kind of like a combination of Jeff Barrow, who is a DJ, music producer kind of guy. You can tell like there's a lot of hip hop influence in this as well. And Beth Gibbons, who is the singer, and she has a really good voice, a really, really good voice. And the mixture between those two kind of like, one's kind of like a down tempo, kind of relaxing, yet kind of makes you think type of hip hop, beats that are going on top of the, her really beautiful kind of singing kind of makes like a really weird atmosphere. At some points it's kind of mellow. At other points it's kind of like verges on being like into the creep factor, because it's, the psychedelic aspect is there, but it's not like creepy. It's more like, ooh, this is kind of like an interesting direction. A lot of really good songs on this. It's really hard to describe. It's just really worth listening to. Just giving it a try, because there has not been a single person that I've been like, hey, have you heard of Portishead? And someone has gone like, this is not my style. Every single person I have ever introduced this to, and I introduce a lot of people to a lot of different music, and a lot of times people are like, this is terrible, Jim. What are you listening to? But this is probably one of the very few bands that I've introduced this to that I have yet to hear someone say this is not my thing.
I love tons of stuff just like this.
Yeah. So if you like hip hop, if you like good not even adult contemporary, it's definitely maybe some R&B. It's kind of a combination of the two, but it's
like techno.
Yeah, I wouldn't go with town techno. There's a lot of live instrumentation on this as well. It's not just hip hop as well. I mean, there's a full band. But yeah, those are definitely, in my opinion, those are the stars of the show. I mean, there's other people in the band as well. And they've been kind of on like weird hiatuses. They've been around since, let's see, 91, but they've only released 3 albums, which is Dummy, this one, and then a third that came out a long time after the second one, which I think was pretty good. but it doesn't hold a candle to the first two. I think the first two albums, definitely check them out. This one being my favorite port of the self-titled album, and then Dummy, which is really, really good as well.
Yeah.
There's really not much to say about it, just other than you need to check this album out. I can't find anybody who has listened to this and said, this is not my thing.
So now we're going to move into a comic book review, and we're going to say, hey, comic book reviews, what's going on? This isn't like one of these independent comics you've been trying to promote a little bit, get a little crossover love from other people on YouTube. Well, this is by Brian Edward Hill, who's a very good comic book writer, but also he writes for television. He writes for the Teen Titans live action show on the DC Universe, and he wrote the good episodes of that. He also wrote some episodes for an anime / cartoon / anime called Cannon Busters. He's done a whole lot of things, and he's really productive, really good writer, and he's somebody who takes the superhero genre of comics fairly seriously. So I first became aware of Brian Hill when he started asking people on Twitter, hey, comic book fans who like manga, why do you like manga? So I started to throw some of that stuff out there. He and I talked on Twitter about it, sent direct messages, started buying his comic books. I'm going, wow, this guy's really good. And the whole anime manga thing he was trying to dredge into ended up forming a core element of the Batman and the Outsiders comic series, of which this is the annual. So this is like over a year of, him talking to people on the internet, trying to coalesce their ideas, which is really an interesting creative decision. So Batman and the Outsiders is about a side team that Batman has that does different things for him. And the way he's written the series up until this annual book it's like a TV show. It's like a 12-episode streaming series show. And the 12th comic ends pretty much like a cliffhanger for a streaming show that knows it's getting a second season. So it doesn't have to worry with we're going to give it a kind of tying most of it up ending and hoping we get a second season to produce everything out. It's like, nah, we got the second season, so we can leave an actual cliffhanger to bring people into the next season. So this focuses on the two leader characters on the team. Black Lightning, who was a black school teacher, got electrical powers, and Katana, who was in the terrible Suicide Squad movie. So Katana has a demon-cursed sword, and she's getting a power-up in this comic book. But there's some interesting story developments and story writings going on here. So she's talking to Jefferson, and they're at a ramen noodle joint in what's probably Tokyo. It doesn't actually say what major city it's in Japan, but it's in a big major city. So how much do you know about like samurai stuff and Japanese culture, Jim?
Not much. I mean, I probably should. I know a whole lot less than I probably should. My mother grew up in Japan, so
yeah, like there's like the whole ritual suicide thing that you've seen in like samurai movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a second person involved in that to make sure that the person doesn't screw it up. So if you have two main characters together in a Japanese context, one of them has a magical cursed sword. The second person is going to be there to do something dark for that first person. So they're having a fun conversation about the nature of the curse on the sword. And Katana has an interesting quote about magic. Magic is madness. It consumes your understanding of what is and what cannot be. It's not my choice to use it. To which he replies, but it's in your blood. And so they go through the whole thing. They find out about what's going on with the sword. And spoiler, but not spoiler, she's going to have to stab herself with her cursed sword. And she tells a really interesting anecdote. When I was a child, I used to go to the cliffs of Tojinbo. To me, it was the edge of the world. The scent of the sea, the wind, like a voice calling to me. And the voice told me to jump, like a song. Jump. And I wanted to jump. So what most people don't know is there's a certain percentage of people who they get on a cliff, they get on a bridge, they get on a tall structure. There's a voice in the back of their head that says, go jump. And, it's just like a normal thing that they just ignore. So this person, however, goes into the whole thing. I would see myself falling and smiling, but I never did jump. I hoped the song would leave me, but the voice of the need, it never did. And I feared the part of myself that wanted to listen. So she does the most self-destructive thing she can do. She stabs herself with her magical sword so it can consume her soul and she can confront her destiny. And so her best friend and co-mentor of this team of young Batman-related superheroes, has to protect her body while shadow demons come around. She goes in, confronts her destiny, comes out and saves him, and they have a very touching moment at the end of the comic. After she also has a touching moment with her dead husband who's in the magic sword, but she leaves him to save her friend. And he asks her if she's all right. She says, "No, I'm changing and I'm scared. I'm on the cliff standing against the edge. The voice is still with me. I need another voice I can trust. You have mine." They hug. That's the end of the comic. It's very well written. There's lots of action, good pacing. Art is exceptional. The biggest problem I have with Brian's work is, while Brian's a consummate professional, he always upsells everybody he works with. I don't feel, as a fan and a consumer of his work, he always gets the best art team to work with him. But this art team on this book is really solid. And this was one of his last regular comic gigs. He said he's going to maybe do a mini series here, a mini series there, or something special just to keep his toe in the universe. But this is the annual for a very good comic book series. I highly recommend you go pick it up. I imagine this will probably be included in the trade for this whole year. And then there'll probably be another trade that's the complete run of this arc. There was a prequel arc to this that was ran in Batman Comics that he also wrote. And Brian's the kind of guy who will tell you, I wrote Batman Comics, so when I go in a Hollywood meeting and say, "Hey, listen, you may not know me, you may not know what I've done, but I wrote Batman." And people take him seriously. But what makes him special is he also takes writing Batman seriously. So go pick up the comic book. It's good. And we're going to talk about Harriet Tubman, which is a movie I've been wanting to see. And Jim actually went to see it before me.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
And stuff we remember from social studies class.
So I don't remember social studies class that well enough to be like, well, they got this wrong and they got this wrong. There was a few things that I know about Harriet Tubman that they included in this movie in a very interesting way. But I mean, there's no real spoilers to spoil anything. She became one of the biggest slave rescuers in the Underground Railroad in the United States right before the Civil War.
Freed a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, and ended up becoming, I don't know if general is the right word, but she was an active participant in the Civil War on the Union side in order to stop slavery.
The way things worked in the Civil War were kind of complicated. If you're rich and famous enough, you basically had your own battalion of people.
Oh, okay.
You paid to get them all hired.
Yeah. So the story is about her and her escape, and she shows up in Philadelphia, and they're like, "All right, so who'd you bring? Who brought you?" And she was like, "I just me." She's like, "Wait a minute, you trekked 100 miles by yourself? What?" She's like, "Yeah." They're like, "Wow, you're pretty hardcore." While she's there, she realizes like, "Oh no, I still have a bunch of friends and family down there, and I sent word back to let them know I'm okay, and I can't get a hold of my husband. I have to go down and start rescuing some people." And she makes multiple trips down there. So Harriet Tubman is played by Cynthia Erivo. I don't know how to say her last name, but she was
professionals.
We're professionals. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but she was fantastic in not one of my favorite movies. Well, one of my favorite movies, but my favorite movie of last year, which was Bad Times at the El Royale. And it was really good that they got someone who did Broadway singing, doing Broadway shows, to do Harriet Tubman, considering that singing it was an aspect of her character and the Underground Railroad. I think she did a fantastic job. All of the acting was really good. The directing was really good. The editing was really good. It was very moving, especially towards the end. There was a couple scenes where she would do like speeches, either to one person or to her battalion and stuff. That was really kind of moving, tear jerking. Not even gonna lie. This movie was fantastic, though. I don't know if this is not a complaint, but I think it's more like I'm spoiled. We've been seeing movies like Midsummer. We've been seeing movies like Joker. We've been seeing movies like Lighthouse. which have had
where
like
the cinematography is on a whole different level.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. Like some of the movies that we've been getting lately have just had some of the best cinematography I have seen in film ever. And then I go and see this movie, and everything. The cinematography is good. It shows you exactly what you need to see. However, while I'm watching it, I'm going like, that'd have been great if it was shot like this, or it was shot like this. It'd have been much more beautiful and much more, the symmetry was a little bit, it wasn't off the kilter. Or maybe if they shot it like a comic book or a graphic novel where it was kind of up in the corner and kind of diagonal. Mm-hmm. Like, I was thinking in terms of that, but I was like, no, I'm just being nitpicky. You're seeing exactly what you're supposed to see, and it's done well, but it's just not, Midsummer. It's not Joker. So that was bothering me, but I think it's not because the cinematography was bad. It's just that I'm a spoiled brat.
Or like when we watched Jay and Silent Bob rebooted, like the fact that it was digital bothered us both in the beginning.
Because Kevin Smith
this should not be digital.
Yeah, because he was one of the holdouts. He was doing. It wasn't until Clerks that he started doing digital. Or Clerks 2. Sorry, Clerks 2 that he started doing digital. All of his other films, even though after all of these other movies have been going digital for a while, he was like, "Nah, I like film. We're gonna do Dogma in film."
Yeah, great. And like when I watched recently, Dolomite Is My Name. It's like, it's about a 70s blaxploitation guy, bro. You totally should have this on film. It needs to be grainy.
On cheap film. And sometimes you don't check the gate because fuck it. That would have been great. But they didn't. But no, this movie I think was shot digitally, and it didn't matter because, it's not supposed to be one of those kind of artsy movies.
Yeah, we've grown though in our ability to appreciate things. Like a year or two ago, I probably wouldn't have appreciated all the effort that was put into the cinematography of The Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've actually watched like old early 20th century movies, so like that was what I really got out of the cinematography of Lighthouse. Is how I was like, oh, this is like an early Russian movie. This is kind of cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we're just spoiled, but this is definitely going on my. This is definitely going on my top 10 list for sure. This is pretty good so far. Yeah. This is really great. I wouldn't say there's anything like really truly memorable about it,
except for that Frederick Douglass.
Yeah. So there's a Frederick Douglass cameo where they're talking about because this is after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed, and they go into the thing and they're talking about what we're gonna do about this, and she's like, I don't give a shit. I'm not gonna run away back. I'm not gonna run away and stay in Canada. Like, it doesn't matter if it's 100 miles or if it's 1,000 miles. Like, we're gonna go down and we're gonna rescue every one of these slaves that are being captured, because you guys have been either free your entire lives, or you have been free so long that you forgot the horrors of slavery that's been going on. And she explained some of the things, that goes on in slaves, in chattel slavery. She's like, we can't stand for this. We need to go back and do this. Like, and while she was pointing out, like, either you've been free, forever, or you have been, you've been free too long, or you gotten a little too famous. And she points at Frederick Douglass, and I thought that was a nice little way. They don't mention him by name. They don't say like, this Frederick Douglass. You just see him and go, oh, Frederick Douglass.
He's got that look.
Yeah. You can't miss him.
Certain people look a certain way. It's like, yeah, no, that's who that guy is.
Yeah. I don't know how much it deviates from history for cinematic effect. I'm sure it does. But there was a couple kind of interesting things that happened along the movie, like. They had like a fair. I think she was mulatto. She was a daughter of a slave who was raped by the slave master. So she had that white complexion, and she ended up convincing him that she was the son of one of the slave owners, because they had the same face. She's like, oh, I recognize you. You're related to so and so. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm his son. And she's like, oh, okay, great. And then it wasn't until they got to the slave owner who owned Harriet, who was looking for the Moses, right, was like, these sons of bitches don't even realize that guy doesn't have a son. He's got 9 wives or 9 daughters.
Exactly.
And he was like, let's not tell them, and let's go track them ourselves and get that money.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there was some kind of interesting things. She sings really beautifully, which is great. kind of adds to the story as well, because that's how she used to call the other slaves. Like if Moses was coming, you would hear the let my people go, and she would go and sing, and she sings beautifully. If you really want a good example of how beautifully she sings, you really should check out Bad Times at the El Royale, which I cannot recommend enough. And I'm sure Baron is probably cringing right now, like, stop recommending this movie, Jim. I've already seen it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
exactly.
This is a definitely good film. I was really happy I went and saw it. I wish I would have saw this last night and saw the next movie we're going to talk about and delivering today, because that would have made my Halloween a whole lot better. But
So
backwards.
let's talk about the trash that we saw.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. Not my favorite, but definitely one of.
So let's talk about Terminator, the trash, because this was the main event that we've all been promising you guys. So Jim and I did a little bit of a pre-gaming on this, so we're going to talk a little bit about what we thought was good in the movie.
I was already pre-gaming this movie just because I wanted to see the first Terminator, and I was like, all right, I better see the second one for this one.
Yeah, we both saw Terminator 1 and 2 before this, and Jim actually watched a little bit of Genesis.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I saw the Red Letter Media review of it.
Well, that's better than watching Genesis.
That's how I watched the prequels, is I just watched Mr. Plankett's review of it. Yeah.
So what did you take away positive out of this movie?
Yeah, so there's a lot of good things about this movie, and there's a lot of bad things. But there's one particular bad thing that overshadows everything that could possibly make me enjoy the things.
We'll get to that in a moment.
We'll get to that, yeah. So I really did like how they incorporated Arnold in this movie. It didn't seem like it was a last minute, like, oh, we better figure out a way to throw him in. He was very necessary to the plot of the story. The way he was used was really good. I liked it.
Possible that was all added in after reshoots.
Possibly, but it seemed like it was well written. And it was, yeah. I really did like the what's her name? The new term,
Grace.
Grace. I love Grace. She did a good job. However, it was in spite of the bad writing.
Yeah. She did everything she could with what she was given. Yeah. And what she was given was not very good.
Yeah. Linda Hamilton's back, and holy fuck is she back.
I would love to see Linda Hamilton do some other action-y movie stuff.
Yeah.
Like, whatever fits in her schedule. Like doing something similar to like what older Clint Eastwood did in some things. That could be fun.
Yeah. She was great in this. Unfortunately, everything else kind of falls off. Falls off from there.
So
I definitely and the way the movie concluded, I thought was really great.
So let me give my perspective on the good things.
Yeah,
every scene with Linda Hamilton and Arnold in the movie worked beautifully.
Yes. Except
they
the jokes.
played off of each other and they had legitimate charisma. And like watching that, I was saying, like, man, how many of these movies have we watched where they're like trying to promote charisma on people who don't have half this between them? The charisma between her and Grace was also very good, which is going to get into what we're going to talk about the bad of the movie in a minute.
Yeah.
I thought the idea behind the double Terminator character was an interesting idea, and I think the actor who played him could have been good in a different part.
Yes.
He was miscast in this part. But I don't think he was made it bad. I think it was a bad decision by the director.
Yeah. He seems like a guy that you would want to hang out with, or a guy that's like in a lead in a a Hispanic orientated comedy film. He's not a menacing villain that I'm scared of.
Like, I mean, if Marvel Comics is looking for somebody to do White Tiger in a movie, he'd be a good guy to cast as White Tiger. And White Tiger's basically a Hispanic version of Black Panther.
Yeah.
That they have. So everything falls apart for me with the character of Dani.
Yep.
I'm sure she's a good actress, but she was absolutely not only wrong for this part, she didn't have charisma with any of the characters, and the trinity between her and Grace and Sarah Connor was necessary to make the movie work.
And it was lopsided.
And also, It's like, okay, she's an illegal alien for no real reason in the movie, which bugged me. So like, they made her an illegal alien, I think, because Mexico kicked in some money for them because they did filming in Mexico. I think that's the same reason Rambo: Last Blood also filmed in Mexico. I also think that they wanted to talk about how militarized the border is now, and they did
No,
that
it was
though
on
without.
the nose.
It was too on the nose, number one, and number two, they didn't actually do anything interesting with it. Like, for
Yeah.
example, they had a scene in the in the bad future where they should have had that sequence be similar, where they got caught by ice, to what happened with the Terminators rounding up people in the bad future. That would have been very interesting, but the movie wanted to be safe. It wanted to imply something without actually having the stones to write a check with what it's trying to cash.
Well, there was one part that was super on the nose, which is when they were like, let these prisoners go, and they're like, you mean the detainees? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, come on,
bro.
yeah,
Come on.
That's too on the nose.
Too on the nose. The concept of the new AI that replaced Skynet could have been an interesting concept, but it was like, oh yeah, it's not Skynet anymore, it's Legion. Well,
Yeah.
what makes Legion different than Skynet? I don't know. Why do you want to know that?
Yeah.
Well,
At
we're
least
trying to establish
Genesis was trying. Yeah, at least Genesis was like going somewhere interesting, like, oh, social media and cell phone updates. It's like this was just like,
Is
oh
the
no,
new
it's just the same
Skynet.
thing. It's just the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, that at least was trying to go somewhere. This wasn't. The double end Terminator, while it's an interesting concept, was absolutely practical as a combat warrior, which is what we see in one sequence of the future. So it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And they don't use its double Terminator thing for anything useful in the movie,
No.
which also doesn't make any sense.
It just, when he needs a little bit of backup, he splits into two things, and I'm like, there's so many things you could have done with two Terminators, one that's a shapeshifter and one that's just in a skeleton.
Like, say, have the heroes chase the endoskeleton while the liquid metal guy is sit up in a crawl space with a sniper rifle.
Or have the that guy imitate one of the other characters and be like, hey, come over here, and lures him into a trap with the other skeleton.
Exactly. And
they didn't do any of those.
So let's talk about the meat and potatoes of the movie. So the opening first act of the movie is basically all of the best story beats from Terminator 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of action really early in the movie, but all of that is ruined. All of that is ruined by that opening 10-minute sequence.
Yeah.
So in the opening 10-minute sequence, John Connor gets fucking murdered.
Yes, in cold blood.
In cold blood, and he gets murdered to establish motivation for Arnie's character and Linda Hamilton's character. Whereas, I don't know, we could say, hey, Linda Hamilton, your character saved the future. Her son John has gone on to just be an ordinary douchebag. But she finds out from a Terminator that self-reprogrammed himself to not be a terrible person, that there are other time travelers going on. So you, because of your experience and knowledge, have decided to save the world yet again. And this Terminator, realizing that his future is over, he wants to build the best future he can with humanity now. Boom, there's the motivation for both characters, and you don't have to kill John Connor.
You don't have to have a giant middle finger to Terminator 2.
Which had one of the most perfect endings in this kind of movies.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't. And I rewatched Terminator 2 before this, and I forgot how good the actual storytelling in Terminator 2 was.
Yeah. And Terminator 1 was good, had good storytelling too.
Yeah. And we're going to get into where the Terminator franchise breaks down in a little bit here, but so Danny is just like some girl living in Mexico City, goes to work in a car factory, and they have a sequence where they talk about automation replacing human workers in the factory.
On the nose.
On the nose. And they don't do anything with it. And all the on the nose points, they don't do anything with.
Yeah, like they could have been like, this is the robots, the programs they're building for it. This was Legion. They didn't do that.
Nope, they didn't do that. And that would have been interesting. That would have explained why she was the leader of the Future Resistance. Also, ... How about she was from like one of the cartel infested areas in northern Mexico? So like she has street smarts and survival skills. And that's why she was ended up being able to become a good leader and resistance fighter. It's like they had this idea of filming in Mexico and making the character an illegal alien, but they didn't want to do anything interesting with it. And so, like, yeah, she's just totally this badass person in the future for no real reason. That doesn't make any sense. It's really bad filmmaking. So they go through a sequence of getting into the United States illegally, and they have the coyote who says, well, you know, I just help people living a good life, blah, 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 blah. Like, human trafficking is basically slavery, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, these people do get to have jobs, but that you pay them, they pay you a whole bunch of money when you're a coyote once they get to the States.
Yeah.
And also,
a real coyote would have been like, oh, you want to move people across the border? Okay. You're going to have to pay me this much money, and I get to rape Danny.
And also, we're going to throw you in a cell.
And I get to rape the robot chick because that's kind of hot.
And also, we're going to throw you in a semi-truck with a bunch of people. Hope you don't suffocate.
Yeah.
So like, that was kind of a gross part of the scene of the movie. Not as gross as murdering John Connor.
Which they're going in front of these coyotes, which coyotes are no good.
Yeah, coyotes are no good. So, again, it doesn't go into any of the nuances of it. It just says, yeah, this whole illegal immigration thing is great. Totally great and fine. And I'm okay with you disagreeing with me on illegal immigration. I'm not okay with you saying, yeah, the status quo is totally okay.
Yeah. And see, like,
we're not going to critically look at it at all.
I think you and I are on different opinions when it comes to illegal immigration.
Well, I think there needs to be a actual reform to the immigration system. I think our government actually needs to know what it's wanting to do for immigration.
Yeah.
And I don't think it does. Because I think that involves hard decision making that our politicians are being rewarded by not making.
I think keeping people out at the border only lets in the terrible, mostly the terrible people. If you let the good people in, it'd be a whole lot better. But yeah, we don't have that, so we have different opinions on it. But even still, even I was like, no. It doesn't matter what side of the political coin you are when it comes to immigration. You should not glorify coyotes. These are awful, terrible people.
These are bad people.
Yeah.
Who abuse people.
Yes.
Who abuse people who are in absolute desperation, suffering, and squalor.
Yeah.
That was not good.
No.
So they get across the border. They get caught by ICE because, of course, they do. Because otherwise, there wouldn't be a time for the Terminator to catch them. And this is something I've noticed in some of the smarter reviews I've watched about this movie before, and it's a good point. What made the first two Terminator movies work is they were horror movies. The original Terminator was Jason Voorhees, but he was a robot. The second one, he was kind of sort of Freddy Krueger that was fighting Jason Voorhees. And as these movies get away from being horror movies, they have to create reasons for the Terminator to find people and get to where they are. So this was kind of a contrived thing to give a contrived political message that was kind of stupid. It was kind of stupid, and it didn't work.
Yeah. And again, the things that I liked about this movie were just overshadowed. Like, the whole time I was starting to enjoy something, I was just like,
yeah, but they totally,
they fucking just murdered him in cold blood. Not just murdered him, but murdered his legacy and murdered everything that made all of the other two movies great.
And also, they murdered young Edward Furlong. They didn't kill John Connor as a grown adult who had lived a normal life. And
see, that would have been better. At least he did something, and lived a little bit. Not just like, hey, that whole movie that you just saw. Yeah, immediately afterwards he dies, so that makes that whole movie fucking completely pointless. Yeah, we're gonna make that whole movie just completely fucking pointless. See, now if he was grown up and later on, maybe he dabbled some drugs or whatever, he's not really necessary anymore because they ended Skynet. Okay. Yeah. At least that movie, at least we know, that was the end of that story. And then there was another story that started up where it required him to die. But no, now we're told that actually the real ending of Terminator 2 was He gets fucking murdered at the end.
And also,
It was
James
all for
Cameron has
nothing.
a history of endorsing Terminator sequels because he makes money off of it, and he's trying to help his friends make money. And he later admits, "Yeah, I fucking hated that too. I'm sorry."
What she's gonna do with
So,
this one?
so all the big promotion of like, no, James Cameron is back now.
No, he's not.
No, he's not at all.
No, it's just
So-
it's all celebratory.
It's all celebratory. So yeah, so they eventually get to Carl the Terminator's house, and Sarah wants to murder him immediately because it's the one who murdered John, and you know that because he has a scar like the one she gave him when he murdered John.
Mhm.
And the problem is, I don't feel anything because the movie just makes me angry at that point. Because she would have hunted that Terminator down and murdered it. She would have tried to find it. And he's been living for years as a drapery guy in Laredo, Texas. And he's got a Mexican wife and a kid. And they have
You
a
can't have
non-sexual
solid
relationship.
colors in a baby's room. It's just
Yeah.
not the right color, the texture.
Yeah, so
Ha-ha.
that's a thing that is one of the many things about this movie is like none of the giant plot holes are addressed or even hand waved away. It's like, yeah, this makes absolutely no sense. Why would Sarah Connor, a person who's been hunted by governments and evil space AIs from the future with armies of death robots coming after her, ever use a cell phone? Well, she needs the cell phone for the plot to happen. Okay, well, why would she just go murdering things because some random person with an encrypted cell phone number told her to? That sure sounds like a government trap to me.
Yeah.
That totally sounds like a trap. Also, why does Sarah Connor have connections with military intelligence? They don't tell us, and that makes no sense. So does that mean the military intelligence...
And it doesn't really truly further the plot in any meaningful way.
It's a complete red herring.
Yeah.
And it's also an unnecessary red herring because Carl, who killed John, could have said, listen, when we get there, you can remove my power cell and we can use it to terminate the RX-9.
Yeah.
But
Or
no.
I'll help you sneak into this Air Force base. You know how to fly this thing, right? All right, we will steal one. Then you don't even need that whole plot at all. Don't need it.
Nope. It's just dumb.
Yeah.
Just dumb.
The only thing you would need to do is just figure out another way to explain why she's there when Terminators show up, which you could do, which you could write if you're clever, but they're not, so they don't.
They don't. And then they have a big fight with the Terminator in a hydroelectric power dam, and the turbine explodes, and they need to create a powerful EMP blast. Have you ever been around when a transformer explodes, Jim?
No.
When a active running generator or active running piece of electrical infrastructure explodes, it gives off an EMP.
Oh.
Now,
so what you're saying is if you have a really big one, it might be big enough to knock out a Terminator, and that's all they needed to do this whole time?
Right, but then they couldn't have the Grace, the super soldier character, bravely sacrifice herself to save the woman who she already bravely sacrificed herself to save earlier in the movie.
But all she had to do was just jump in the generator and kill all the Terminators, including herself.
Yeah.
That would have been it. But that wouldn't have made for a really cool fight sequence, though.
No, it would not have made for a really cool fight sequence. And that fight wasn't really good.
No, all of the fights were fine. I'm going to disagree with you on this. The problem was everything was zoomed in, so you couldn't see anything that was happening.
It was too jumpy around digital.
Yeah.
I don't think they had proper time to finish the digital effects on that.
Yeah.
I think those fight sequences were all added in reshoots, and they didn't have adequate time to produce them.
Yeah. And there had to be something because Miller is really good at fight sequencing. Just look at the Deadpool movies. He knows what the fuck he's doing. I mean, the guy before Deadpool was his first movie. And the reason why he was really good at those kind of sequencing is because he was making video games before that.
Yeah.
So
I'm guessing that they had to rush in new fight sequences as part of the reshoots.
Yeah.
And that's why those sequences looked bad. And then at the end...
Because it could have been really good. Some of the stuff in there was pretty good.
And at the end, Arnold kills himself while killing the RX-9. He says "for John" as his catchphrase, which was kind of good, but
It doesn't make
I'm
up for the fact that you fucking murdered him for no
yeah,
reason.
yeah. It's like Arnold delivers it great. He's a seasoned proven actor. He delivers it exactly like he should. But the whole rest of the movie undermines his performance. So let's talk about the anti-woman themes in this movie that's designed to advance feminism. So what do you think about hating women in this movie?
What do you mean?
So Sarah Connor has a whole thing where she's saying, oh, Danny's obviously going to be the mother of the savior of the free world again.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not what happened. No, Danny's going to be the John Connor figure.
Which I saw coming a fucking mile away. I was like,
well,
here.
Not only did I know that from the leaks, they telegraphed it.
Yeah, I wasn't paying attention to leaks. You sent me reviews, and as soon as they started getting into the spoilers, I was like, all right, now I just needed to hear you say it wasn't good. So like when they were sitting on the train and she was like, I came back to save you because you're going to be important to the revolution. And he's like, yeah, see, it's your womb. And I was immediately, as soon as he started going on about like, pregnant and I was pregnancy and all that stuff, I was like, oh no, she's going to be the leader.
Yeah.
This is all just a big psych at the moment.
But wasn't a good part of Sarah's character is she loved her kid, mm-hmm. and she was actually raising him the best way she could and also raising him for his future destiny.
No. The reason why she was raising him is because he was going to be important, not her.
Yeah. Didn't Sarah, she
was resentfully like helping him, which is not what the movies were
not
about.
What happened in Terminator 1 or 2.
No.
Also in Terminator 2, how she becomes a Terminator in that whole sequence in the Dyson household. And John brings her back and she comes back to her humanity through her love for her child, who then gets brutally murdered probably weeks later from that touching moment. I mean, how terrible is that to do to a person? That they're a fictional person, but how terrible is that? And that you just make her this bitter, hateful person who thinks her only importance was her ovaries.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
I mean, that is a total betrayal of what the prior movies were about, and it's almost as bad as the murder of John Connor. Almost, but not quite.
Yeah, they just completely shit on the whole legacy of those first two movies, and I was very upset with that the whole time. And anytime there was things happening that was good, I couldn't help but just go, "Yeah, but you
murdered John Connor."
Yeah, but
also, there's a concept archetypically in mythology that's somewhat of a misnomer called the mother, maiden, and the crone, the 3 stages of the woman, that are represented in this movie by Sarah Connor as the crone, the elder woman, and Danny and Grace both flip. Grace is encountered first by Danny in the future as the young woman who's full of innocence and naivete, but she's not. So they're corrupting the archetype already. And then it switches. When Grace becomes the protector of Danny, she's then able to encounter Danny as the innocent, pure young woman. So she can then be brought forward to be initiated by the elder of the community. But instead of, actual motherhood and actual life-giving, all 3 of them are represent the violence that's an inherent part of the crone of the elder death god woman figure. So it's really anti-woman, anti-life, and really nihilistic. And I hated that. I mean, the relationship between Grace and Sarah was interesting. And what they tried to do with Grace and Danny was interesting, but it didn't work because they didn't know what they were doing, and Danny was a terrible casting decision.
Mm-hmm. No, see, I think this movie could have worked if they just switched those characters. Just switched them.
Yeah.
Made the cute girl the Terminator. Made the woman.
Then they can't make human slavery a positive thing in a movie about humans being exterminated by a species of robots.
Well, she could be like a Louis C.K. thing. It's like a white chick in Mexico City, right?
Yeah. Let's see. let's also get into the whole Legion, which is the replacement for Skynet. So Judgment Day is all the computers just stop working. Planes crash out of the sky, all sorts of problems. Human civilization falls to pieces within a week. Why does it crash? Why do the computers decide to give humans a giant FU?
We don't know.
We don't know. And the movie doesn't care. So without this impending doom, and why there's this impending doom, and why humanity is responsible for its own demise, the post-apocalypse doesn't work. There's no emotional pathos in the post-apocalypse at all. So post-apocalyptic themes were important to the Terminator movies, but the original two, it's about the nuclear war. The third one, kind of sort of about the nuclear war. It's not really a fresh topic on there, but at least it tries. Again, the post-apocalypse in Terminator 4 was on point because you're in the apocalypse now. We've gotten there finally. And Terminator Genisys kind of didn't know what it was doing. But at least tried to do something different. So we could appreciate that at least. And Skynet was a computer designed to run the military. This is a cyber warfare suite. Wait, maybe Legion is what happens when John McAfee uploads his consciousness into the internet. And maybe he's not exterminating humans, but he just thinks they're all full of cocaine. So Legion shuts off all the computers and then for some reason decides to make an army of robots to kill humans. Nothing why, no hints, no teasers, nothing. It's just a thing that happens. Because we need to make a Terminator movie, so of course there have to be robots that kill people. And the world building is extremely lazy and it doesn't think about things. Like, for example, let's get with the basic temporal paradox. Why were we trying to kill John Connor? Because John Connor defeats Skynet, and as a last-minute effort to save itself, it sends its Terminator/Terminators back in time to stop John Connor from being able to form the Resistance. Well, what happens? One of those Terminators is successful in doing it, but Skynet doesn't happen. But why, though? but why, though? Oh, wait, the movie doesn't have any interest in telling you that. Also, Skynet was based off of the neural architecture of a Terminator. Hey, here's a thought. What if the historical events that happened to create Skynet were interrupted and Skynet just happens to send random Terminators back to recreate itself? I don't know. Maybe one of them would have recreated itself and then started the whole loop again. But no, that would be intelligent. And this writing is not intelligent at all. Also, Carl is somehow connected to the alternate future that's now developed with Danny and Grace. But why, though? No, really. But why, though? Is it just because Danny and Grace showed up there? What would have happened if they didn't? So are you saying this was just always a natural self-contained time loop? That's awfully convenient, even by the standards of this franchise. At least for John Connor as a self-contained time loop, we had a reason. Robots take over the future. We defeat the robots. The guy who leads the defeat of the robots has to be stopped. So the robots send somebody back in time, which leads to him being created and the robots being created. At least that all makes sense as a chain of events. Does this movie try to make sense? No. Why would it do that? Also, we have a society where humans are being brutally hunted down by machines. Hey, let's convert humans into basically a fleshier Terminator. Shouldn't that human society have had moral qualms about doing that? Also, isn't that basically Nazi human experimentation? Shouldn't we look at how fighting evil machines is turning us into evil machines? No, because this movie doesn't have any time to take an interest in any of the intelligent things that Terminator 1, 2, 3, and 4 had to say on the topic. It says, hey, we've been trying to do this idea of a Terminator-human hybrid for 3 movies now. Let's see if we can get that right.
No.
You failed at that 4 times in a row. Also, what's interesting is, excluding the first 3 movies, which narratively all make sense together, All three of the movies have tried to remove John Connor from the equation. All of them have not been accepted by the fans.
No.
Maybe the fact we want to have a hero of the future to root for when we know there's going to be a post-apocalypse is what we want. Also, the fourth Terminator movie said, let's not make John Connor the hero until the very end. Well, what's the whole point of us having a war arc with John Connor then, if he's not the badass, awesome hero from the beginning? You could be a badass, awesome military war hero without winning in the beginning, and then you have to plucky, use strategy, rely on your allies, friends to come up with something interesting. But no, we're not going to do that. Oh. Also, the final three Terminator movies have all removed the horror elements. Because again, at its core, this is a slasher movie. The Terminator's a slasher. It's coming to kill you. It's unstoppable. And that's another thing. We needed a MacGuffin EMP device to kill the two Terminators. Here's a better idea. What if you can kill it if you force the liquid metal to repair the endoskeleton after it's been damaged, and then have a sufficiently powerful explosion to destroy both of them? Wouldn't that have been a more interesting fight sequence? That they're trying to damage it just enough so that
that's something that James Cameron would write.
Yeah, and he's just right now busy collecting a paycheck.
No, he's too busy going, I need more money to fund my Pocahontas 2 Electric Boogaloo.
And also, I'm needing to make a new submarine. I mean, that's not entirely fair to James Cameron, but it's a little bit fair.
It's fair enough.
Okay.
So,
wouldn't that have been an interesting fight sequence?
Look, there's many different ways we could have constructed better movies out of this.
Yeah. Also, the idea,
the last of which is the one that they actually came up with, that they actually used,
and it wasn't interesting.
No.
Also, a Terminator who just becomes a house husband. That was an interesting idea. Here's the more interesting part. What if the Terminator house husband was Danny's father? And then
Terminators
from the future he doesn't know about are coming to kill his daughter. So there's only one person he knows of who could protect her, and that's Sarah Connor. But then this other protector from this other future shows up. See, wouldn't that have been a more interesting movie?
Yeah, again, we could go through every single hypothetical scenario on how to fix this movie. Let's just not. Because there's pretty much every idea that you can think of would have been interesting compared to this movie, including bad ones. Yeah, but I do want to give it praise. The way the movie ended was good. Not smart. It was satisfying.
Except look, those two Terminators are melted at the bottom of this shaft. Shouldn't we destroy that to prevent those from being used to create the new AI that's going to destroy all life?
Same with Grace.
No, we're not going to do that.
Same with Grace.
We're not going to do that?
No.
Oh. Also, we're not going to go get that military base that has, her x-rays and stuff and notes from the doctors and, sanitize that? We're not going to do that?
Nope. Well, that's going to be the sequel.
It's never going to happen.
Cleaning up the mess from this movie, which, by the way, so I think right now we're looking at $12 million opening so far. Then again,
Thursday openings.
Thursday opening, yeah. So who knows? But it also was Halloween.
I doubt this pulls in more than 40.
I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think that it's going to make its budget back, but not its marketing budget back.
Yeah, and this film isn't going to have legs.
No.
Basically, anybody who's willing to see the novelty of the trash went Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
Or does a review show.
I mean, my don't recommend this. Was about a third occupied. How big was yours?
It was. I want to say it was a full house, though. Rows behind me, rows in the back were kind of empty. Everything else was full, and the front two rows had a sporadic people in it, but that's kind of expected. But for an opening night on a blockbuster, this movie is supposed to be like a big blockbuster hit movie. It's not there. The middle rows were packed. Everything else.
Something else I mentioned in our pre-gaming of this movie. In the successful Terminator movies, the Terminator didn't talk much. In Terminator 3, Arnold talked a whole bunch more because he was a big star at that point. I mean, he was a big star in Terminator 2, but you had to have Arnold talk more in 3.
Yeah.
The Terminator in 4 was a main character, so he talked a whole bunch. Terminator in 5, Arnold was a main character. He talked a whole bunch.
The things that I liked about this movie, right, was Grace, Linda, Arnold. I do like the fact. I think Arnold was the shining, and Linda were like the shining gem in the big pile of turd that this movie was. I like the idea that the Terminator grew somewhat of a conscience. Learn to quote unquote love, even though he said he didn't exactly feel love or actually have a conscience. It's just something that replicated those emotions.
But it was something similar.
Yeah, and then he actually learned how to be like human. So like when they were talking with Arnold, it was like you were hanging out with, older person from Predator or Commando or some other movie that he was in where he's actually a human being, but he still had was still deadpanning a lot of stuff because he is still part machine. That was kind of clever. Yeah. And if the jokes landed a little bit more, it would have worked.
Arnold was funny.
I did think
where didn't give him a good time to make jokes.
I did think the two jokes that I thought one didn't work. But the other I thought was great, but then you told me that's not a joke. And the one that wasn't a joke was where he was like, my name is Carl. She's like, I am not fucking calling you Carl. I thought that was funny.
She was pissed off. She wanted to murder this thing because it killed her son.
Yeah. I thought was funny.
And the thing is, they killed him for a cheap thing because they couldn't write something better.
No, I thought it was fun. I thought it was fun.
No. Killing John in the beginning was cheap.
Oh, yeah.
And they had to know going into this that everybody was going to fucking hate the movie for doing that.
They didn't. They just didn't. It didn't occur to them. I don't think it occurred to them.
I mean, it had to. If you have human emotions, you had to. And that's the other thing I want to kind of go with. Like in the other Terminator movies, they're trying to save the world. In this movie, they're not really trying to save the world. They're just trying to stop Danny from getting killed. Because they don't say, oh yeah, you defeat the machines. It's just, oh yeah, you lead the resistance to the machines. Because Grace didn't come from a point where final victory over the machines happened. So this movie was even more pointless. I forgot that. That was another terrible thing I hated about this movie.
I'm glad I'm not the only person who saw Avatar was just space. Yeah, everybody did. Everybody saw that. That was a joke for a while. It was furry Pocahontas. It was Space Fern Gully. Yeah.
I'm expecting Avatar to kind of crap the bed a little bit when it actually comes out in the theaters.
Yeah, because the appeal of Avatar was the revolutionary at the time. 3D in regular theaters, beautiful CGI mostly stuff, but now that's in like every fucking Marvel movie, and it's like, okay, now we actually want story.
Well, I'll say
Avatar does not deliver on story.
In James Cameron's defense, the Marvel movies and most movies don't do the 3D right. He's better at using 3D for storytelling.
No, there's no storytelling in Avatar. What are you talking about?
I mean, it's not a good story, but I mean, there is a story there.
All right.
And he's better at delivering the story using 3D as a medium than most other directors.
Here's what I think would have been better as a Terminator movie is if you go, all right, well, they stopped Skynet. The end. Or you say, like, I can understand that, it's inevitable that you're going to have a 3D AI, whatever. But let's just say for the sake of this, you end Skynet, that's it. Okay. Well, how about this? There's going to be other resistance movements around the world, not just in the United States or North America, right? Why don't we get a throwback 80s movie that takes place in, I don't know, Australia or China or Japan or...
Oh, forget that. Forget that. Let me tell you something even more awesome. So what if there's a prime timeline? The original timeline with John Connor and Skynet that starts all these time loops. What if we have a movie about that? like John Connor's like a computer researcher working at the Department of Defense, and he's one of the original guys who builds Skynet. And he's like the guy who says, wait a minute, like these calculations are really weird. I think Skynet's starting to become self-aware. And like he tries to convince people in the military, they don't believe him. And he's able to get enough people in safety to start, saving humanity, while Skynet is secretly stalking him like a Terminator throughout the whole movie before it launches nuclear weapons. Wouldn't that have been interesting? Kind of like what they did.
Everything would have been interesting, but
everything would have been more interesting.
But everybody's cashing in right now on 80s nostalgia, 90s nostalgia. That would have been a really great way to be like, hey, let's remake the movie, fucking a Seaboot, where it takes place in the same time. We don't have to do all the ridiculous stuff that we did in Terminator 2. Yeah. We just one-off Terminator movie. Hey, there's a resistance leader in Australia. Let's do a movie about that, where there's a Terminator sent back in time to go and kill, the mother of this other person, and
you make it kind of like a grungy Mad Max sort of movie.
Yeah, there you go. You're combining the two worlds of or how about that? A crossover of Mad Max.
Yeah,
but no one's thinking.
So
I would say if you're really all about that Terminator lore and you like to see all that stuff, then maybe go check it out. Go and check it out just for the visuals and stuff. But you're going to be really mad. You're going to be very mad.
Also, the visuals aren't really good either.
Well, I mean,
none of the visuals are well designed.
No, I thought the post-apocalyptic world was actually kind of neat. I will disagree with you on that. I thought that was all kind of.
Well, no, I mean like the actual ships and technology though. None of those were well designed.
Well, they had to do something completely different because it's not Skynet now; it's Legion. I did like it.
So next week,
but I don't.
Dr. Sleep is coming. Are you hyped up for Dr. Sleep?
I'm sleeping.
You're so sleepy.
I'm so sleepy. I don't know why. No, that was an honest mistake. I'm getting ready for this. I have not seen The Shining since I was really little, so basically it's essentially the same as having not seen it. So I went to the public library and I borrowed a copy, a dusty copy
of. What was interesting about this is not only is it a Stephen King adaptation, because Stephen King came out with a book this is based off of.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of sort of going to be adapting the ethos that Stanley Kubrick did as well. So, do you think this movie is going to pull it off?
I hope so. Did they shoot this at the Ahwahnee?
I believe they shot the parts in the Ahwahnee at the Ahwahnee.
Okay.
I think they did.
Yeah, the outer part wasn't the Ahwahnee. All of the indoor stuff that happens in that movie was either shot, I think, like the hallways and stuff, that was shot at a studio, but all the stuff in the lobby and stuff, that was shot at the Ahwahnee Hotel in beautiful, I can't reiterate enough, beautiful Yosemite Park in California. If you haven't been to Yosemite, you simply must. It's like I tell people all the time, like Jim, are you a Zionist? And I say, yes, I am a Zionist. I think everybody should go visit Zion National Park, and while they're at it, they should also go to Yosemite National Park, which would also make me a Yosemiteite. Yosemiteite? I don't know what that would be. But I'm an advocate of people going to visit Zion National Park and Yosemite National Park. They're both beautiful.
We also
stay away from Yellowstone. Yellowstone is boring as fuck.
We also have, and I'm going to coming up next week, we have Last Christmas. We have Motherless in Brooklyn.
Black Christmas, you mean?
No, Last Christmas. It's about a British chick who had some sort of a terrible disease.
Oh. So we're getting Black and Last Christmas. What are they trying to say? Are they trying to say black people are going to end Christmas? Why are they racist?
We have John Cena's attempt to become a major star, Playing with Fire.
Stop.
We have Motherless in Brooklyn, which is an Edward Norton joint. Also, there's a movie out about the Battle of Midway,
which I want to go see.
There's a movie about how black lives don't matter and police lives don't matter called Black and Blue.
That's already out.
The current war is still out, but I just really haven't been motivated to see it.
No, nothing looks good right now. I'm gonna wait. Midway.
Well, I mean, there's some good stuff. Like if you're watching right now, and you're saying, obviously I don't want to see Terminator Dark Fate because Jim and Larry both said that's garbage. What's out there today? There's Harriet. Harriet's a good movie.
Harriet's a good movie.
Motherless in Brooklyn might be a good
The Lighthouse.
movie.
By the way, we should talk very briefly about Lighthouse. You said you didn't like it as much as me. Why not?
So
you liked it, but not as much as me.
It's a good movie. It's very technically good. It's very well crafted. But I think what holds the movie back is it's only 2 actors.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the complexity of acting they lose out on because the story only contains 2 actors. I think it's very much evocative of the early 20th century in film, which was pretty good, and I liked all that. And I think it was a very good movie, but for a top-end movie, I think there needs to be something a little bit more transcendental to it. Now, both of these actors are acting at the top of their craft.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematography is exquisitely constructed.
Especially for the frame that they're working with.
Especially with the frame. The sound work is perfect for the story. But I just think that, it's like a 97, 98, maybe a 99. But it's just there's not enough pieces to get it that extra 1%.
Yeah, I thought it was flawless.
Yeah. Also, there's a trash movie out right now called that I might try to see eventually. Countdown. It's all about an app that murders people.
People are saying it's embarrassing. You're going to be genuinely wincing and cringe, not like cringy, ooh cringy. Like this is genuinely a cringy movie, like in a bad way. It's not even like cringe porn.
The only reason I'm semi interested in seeing it is because it looks terrible. Yeah. It looks as terrible as I thought Dark Fate was going to be.
Stuckman just did a review of it, and he said that it was painful to get through. He said he felt embarrassed being seen in the movie theater watching it. A guy who goes and sees every movie was like,
so 2 weeks
I'm embarrassed
being 2 weeks here. From now, I'm stoked up for Ford versus Ferrari.
Yep, that looks like a good.
I'll probably find some time to see Charlie's Angels, but not right away because it's trash.
I'm gonna pass on that one.
Yeah, that movie's trash, so we're not gonna see that right away. And then the following week, let me just pull up what the following week's.
No, we'll get to the following week when it comes. We'll get to the following week when it comes.
Well, the following week is you're gonna have Frozen 2, Lesbian Boogaloo.
No, you're gonna have Frozen 2. I'm not seeing it.
I'm looking forward to see it because I hate it. I have a special hatred for Frozen.
You do. I thought it was all right. I thought it was nothing.
No, I hate
that
it
one
because
song.
it's
The one song was good, and then the rest just okay. Right.
It is literally the worst movie of the Disney animated era. It lacks mythology, spirit, or heart. I agree with Jordan Peterson.
Larry, you just need to let it go. Thanks,
Well,
Tally.
that's our recording in progress today. So everybody, you know how to get. Since we have the selective audience. If you're watching this and you know how to get a hold of us on Twitter or other social media, tell us what you thought about the show today. Yeah, our change up in style and presentation.
Hail worms.
Hail worms.